Today, I stand before you to speak about something profoundly important, something that provides strength, direction, and peace in our lives. The title of my speech is Trust God's Plan. Trusting God's plan is rooted in the belief that there is a greater purpose behind everything that happens in our lives. This idea can be challenging, especially when we encounter hardships, disappointments, or moments of uncertainty. Yet, at the core of trusting God's plan is the unwavering faith that God, in His infinite wisdom, is orchestrating a path for us that is meant to lead us toward growth, fulfillment, and ultimately His divine purpose for our lives. When we trust in God's plan, we acknowledge that there is a grand design, one that extends beyond our limited understanding. It means accepting that our lives are not random and that every experience, both good and bad, is a part of a bigger picture that we cannot always see. We may go through struggles that seem senseless at the time, but faith teaches us that these struggles are not without meaning. God's plan is not always immediately apparent, but it is always in motion, working in ways that may be hidden from us in the moment. In the Bible, we are reminded that God's ways are not our ways, and His thoughts are not our thoughts. Isaiah 55:8-9. As human beings, we often try to control outcomes or rush through difficult times in search of answers. However, when we trust God's plan, we release the need for control and allow ourselves to be guided by a higher purpose. Trusting God's plan means acknowledging that He has a clearer and more profound view of our lives and the world around us than we do. His perspective encompasses not just our present struggles, but also our future success, and He knows exactly how to shape us into who we are meant to become. One of the key aspects of trusting God's plan is understanding that it may not always align with our expectations. We often imagine how our lives should unfold based on our desires and goals, but God's plan can differ. His purpose for us may involve paths we didn't expect to take, challenges we didn't foresee, and even detours that seem confusing or frustrating at the time. However, the beauty of trusting God's plan is in the realization that His plan is always for our good. As Romans 8:28 assures us, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Even in the moments of difficulty, God's plan is working for our ultimate good, refining us and preparing us for what lies ahead. It's important to remember that trusting God's plan does not mean that we will always be free from struggles. We live in a broken world, and difficulties are a part of life. However, the act of trusting God's plan brings us peace, because we know we are not facing these challenges alone. We can find comfort in the fact that God is with us every step of the way, guiding and strengthening us. The challenges we face are not punishments, but opportunities for growth and transformation. God uses these moments to shape our character, deepen our faith, and draw us closer to Him. What may seem like a setback or a failure in our eyes is often part of God's perfect timing and greater purpose for us. Trusting God's plan is also about learning to surrender to His will. There is a profound peace that comes when we let go of our own expectations and align ourselves with His purpose. In moments of doubt or uncertainty, it can be easy to become disheartened or frustrated when things don't go as we planned. But by trusting God, we are placing our faith in His ability to lead us in the best direction, even when we can't see the way forward. We may not always understand why certain things happen, but by trusting God's plan, we trust that He is always working in our best interest. Trusting God's plan is an act of faith that calls for patience, surrender, and confidence in His goodness. It involves letting go of our own understanding and allowing God to lead us according to His will. Though life may bring challenges and moments of uncertainty, we can rest assured that God's plan is always unfolding, working for our good and shaping us into the people He created us to be. By trusting God's plan, we can find peace, strength, and hope in the midst of life's uncertainties, knowing that His purpose for us is greater than we could ever imagine. Trusting God's plan requires letting go of our need for control, and this is often one of the hardest aspects of faith. As human beings, we naturally seek to control the outcomes of our lives, wanting to dictate our path and ensure that things go according to our desires. We make plans, set goals, and work hard to achieve the things we think will bring us happiness and fulfillment. However, trusting God's plan calls us to release this desire for control and surrender to a higher power who sees the bigger picture, knows what is best for us, and is guiding us toward a greater purpose. Letting go of control means accepting that we cannot predict or manipulate every situation. Life often unfolds in ways that are beyond our understanding. We may encounter challenges, delays, or unexpected events that disrupt the plans we have so carefully laid out. These moments can be disorienting and frustrating, especially when things don't go as we expect. However, trusting God's plan calls us to release the need to control every outcome and recognize that we are not alone in this journey. It is in surrendering control that we open ourselves up to the transformative power of God's wisdom and guidance. The Bible teaches us that our understanding is limited and our ways are not always aligned with God's will. In Proverbs 3:5-6, we are urged to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. This verse reminds us that our limited understanding of the world often prevents us from seeing the full picture. We may think we know what is best for us, but God, in His infinite wisdom, knows what we truly need and what will ultimately lead us to fulfillment. Letting go of control means recognizing that we are not meant to carry the weight of life's decisions alone. We are invited to place our trust in God's hands, knowing that He is working all things together for our good. Letting go of control also involves releasing our fear and anxiety about the future. We often feel as though we must take charge of every situation in order to avoid uncertainty or failure. However, when we trust in God's plan, we release that burden of anxiety. Trusting God means knowing that we don't need to have all the answers or have everything figured out right now. God's plan may not always align with our timeline, but it is perfect in its timing. We may face seasons of waiting, uncertainty, or difficulty, but it is during these times that our trust in God's plan grows stronger. When we let go of our own plans and trust in His, we find a peace that surpasses understanding, knowing that God is always in control. Another aspect of letting go of control is learning to trust God when we don't understand the reasons behind certain events in our lives. We may face personal loss, struggle with health challenges, or encounter situations that make us question why they are happening. These moments can feel disheartening, and it can be easy to want to take matters into our own hands. However, trusting God's plan means having faith that even when we don't understand why something is happening, God's purpose is still at work. It means trusting that He sees the bigger picture and that every moment, even the painful ones, is part of a larger, divine plan. Letting go of control also doesn't mean that we become passive or inactive in our lives. Rather, it means that we are willing to submit our plans to God, knowing that His ways are higher than ours. It's a shift in perspective, understanding that while we can make choices and take action, the ultimate control belongs to God. Our responsibility is to follow His lead, trust His guidance, and align our actions with His will. In doing so, we become active participants in the plan He has for our lives, but we do so with the understanding that He is the one orchestrating our path. Letting go of control is a critical component of trusting God's plan. It involves releasing our need to manipulate every outcome and surrendering our desires to a higher purpose. By trusting in God's wisdom, timing, and love, we allow Him to guide us on a path that is greater than we could have imagined. Trusting God's plan doesn't mean we won't encounter struggles or uncertainty, but it means that we can face these challenges with peace, knowing that God is in control and is working everything for our good. When we let go of control and trust God's plan, we open ourselves to His transformative power and experience the joy and fulfillment that come from walking in alignment with His will. Trusting God's plan involves not only believing that He is guiding us, but also having the patience to wait for His timing. We live in a world that values instant gratification. We are conditioned to expect quick results, whether it's through technology, social media, or everyday conveniences. This culture of immediacy can make it difficult for us to understand and embrace God's timing, especially when things aren't unfolding the way we envisioned or as quickly as we'd like. However, trusting God's plan requires a deep belief that His timing is perfect, even when it doesn't align with our own. Patience is often viewed as a virtue, but it can also be one of the most challenging aspects of faith. When we trust God's plan, we are acknowledging that His timing is not bound by the constraints of human expectations. We might feel the urgency to take matters into our own hands or rush through difficult seasons, but trusting God's timing means allowing His process to unfold at its own pace, knowing that He is working behind the scenes. Even when we cannot see immediate results, the Bible consistently teaches us that God's timing is perfect. In Ecclesiastes 3:1, it says, "There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens." This verse reminds us that everything in life has its appointed time. Whether it's a season of growth, a season of waiting, or a season of difficulty, we can trust that each moment is part of God's perfect plan. His understanding of time far exceeds our own, and He knows exactly when we need something, whether it's a lesson, a blessing, or a change in direction. God's timing can be especially difficult to grasp during times of waiting or uncertainty. We often want immediate answers to our prayers or solutions to our problems, but God's timing invites us to be still and trust. This doesn't mean that we passively wait without action. Rather, it is a call to wait with purpose, to trust in the process, and to remain faithful while we wait for God's plan to unfold. This requires surrendering our need for instant results and accepting that God is always at work, even in the moments when we can't see the full picture. Patience in God's timing also means accepting that we may not understand why things happen when they do. We may pray for something and not receive an immediate answer, or we might wonder why our circumstances aren't improving as quickly as we expected. Yet God's timing is not just about when things happen, it is about preparing us for what He has in store. Sometimes the delay or the waiting period is essential for our growth. It may be that we are not yet ready to handle what He is about to bless us with, or He might be using the time to refine our character, develop patience, or deepen our trust in Him. Another aspect of trusting God's timing is learning to trust that His plan for us is far better than our own. We often try to force things to happen on our own timetable, but God knows the bigger picture. There may be obstacles or detours along the way, but these are not signs that God has abandoned us. Instead, they are opportunities for us to grow in faith and to align ourselves more closely with His will. Trusting God's timing means accepting that His delays are not denials, and that everything happens at the right time, even when it doesn't match our expectations. One of the key ways we can develop patience in God's timing is by practicing trust in the small moments. Every day we can choose to trust that God is at work in our lives, even when we don't see immediate results. This act of trust, no matter how small, builds our faith and strengthens our ability to wait with patience. We can also find comfort in the promise that God is never early, but He is never late, He is always right on time. In conclusion, trusting God's timing is one of the most important aspects of trusting His plan. It requires patience, faith, and the willingness to surrender our own timeline to His perfect one. While waiting may be uncomfortable and challenging, it is in these moments that our faith grows stronger and our trust deepens. We can rest in the assurance that God's timing is always perfect, and that He is using every moment, delay, and season to prepare us for what He has planned. When we trust God's timing, we find peace in the waiting, knowing that He is always working for our good, and that His plans for us are greater than we could ever imagine. Trusting God's plan brings peace amidst uncertainty, offering comfort in times when we feel lost or overwhelmed. Life is filled with unpredictable twists and turns, unexpected challenges, loss, heartbreak, or moments of confusion. And during these times, we can easily find ourselves struggling to find peace. The natural human instinct in such situations is often to seek control, search for immediate answers, or wrestle with anxiety. However, trusting God's plan allows us to experience a deep, abiding peace even when circumstances are uncertain or difficult. It is the kind of peace that transcends our understanding and provides a calm assurance that despite the chaos around us, God is in control. The Bible speaks frequently about the peace that comes from trusting God. In Philippians 4:6-7, we are instructed to do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. These verses reveal that true peace comes from surrendering our worries and anxieties to God. When we trust in His plan, we release the burden of trying to figure everything out on our own. Instead, we rest in the certainty that God, who is all-knowing and all-powerful, is working everything together for our good. This peace does not mean that everything in life will be smooth or free of challenges. It means that, even in the face of adversity, we can experience calmness because we know that we are not facing those challenges alone. God's presence is with us every step of the way. His peace is not dependent on our circumstances, but rather on our trust in His ability to guide us through the storm. Jesus Himself spoke about this peace in John 14:27, saying, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid. The peace that God offers is different from the fleeting peace the world provides. While worldly peace is often tied to external conditions, God's peace is an internal assurance that He is in control, no matter what is happening around us. Trusting God's plan is a powerful antidote to fear and worry. When we face the unknown, our minds can race with questions: what will happen next? What if things go wrong? How will I handle this? These thoughts can lead to anxiety, doubt, and fear. However, trusting that God has a plan for us helps us to calm those fears and relinquish the need to control every outcome. When we surrender our plans to God and trust that He is leading us, we allow His peace to fill the spaces left by fear. We can rest knowing that God, who knows the future and holds all things in His hands, will never leave us or forsake us. His peace guards our hearts and minds, preventing anxiety from taking over. One of the most profound aspects of this peace is its ability to help us endure difficult times. When we are in the midst of trials, the world may look at us and wonder how we can remain calm or hopeful. The secret lies in trusting God's plan. His peace allows us to see beyond our immediate circumstances, helping us to maintain our perspective. We can have the confidence that God is using every challenge to shape us and draw us closer to Him. Even in the darkest of times, we can trust that God is present, working for our good and preparing us for a brighter future. Furthermore, trusting God's plan brings peace because it shifts our focus from ourselves to Him. When we are consumed with worry or fear, our focus tends to be on what we can't control. However, when we trust in God's sovereignty, we shift our gaze to His power, wisdom, and love. This perspective enables us to see beyond the challenges and to focus on God's faithfulness. We remember that He has been with us through every trial and that He will continue to guide us through whatever comes next. Trusting God's plan provides a peace that transcends understanding, particularly in times of uncertainty. By surrendering our anxieties to Him and trusting His guidance, we can experience a calmness that is not dependent on external circumstances. This peace is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of God in the midst of it. Trusting God's plan means that we can face life's challenges with confidence, knowing that God is always at work for our good. His peace guards our hearts, calms our fears, and provides the assurance that we are not alone in this journey. As we trust in His plan, we find rest and peace, no matter what life brings our way. Trusting God's plan often requires embracing growth through challenges, which are an inevitable part of life. Life is rarely without its struggles, whether it's personal loss, financial hardship, health issues, or emotional turmoil. These challenges can seem overwhelming, and it's natural to wonder why we must face such difficulties. However, trusting in God's plan means recognizing that these trials are not random or meaningless. Instead, they serve a greater purpose in shaping us into the individuals we are meant to become. God uses life's challenges as opportunities for growth, refinement, and spiritual maturity. This process can be uncomfortable, but it ultimately leads to a deeper relationship with God and a stronger, more resilient character. One of the key aspects of trusting God during challenging times is understanding that He is always with us. While we may feel isolated or abandoned in the midst of our struggles, God promises that He will never leave us or forsake us. Hebrews 13:5. Even when we are going through trials, we are not alone. God is present in our suffering, and He uses those moments to mold us and build us up. In times of difficulty, we often find ourselves relying more heavily on God, seeking His guidance, strength, and comfort. This dependence on Him strengthens our faith and draws us closer to His heart. God's plan for us is not to avoid hardship, but to use it for our good. James 1:2-4 tells us, "Consider it pure, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." This passage reminds us that trials are not to be feared but embraced because they serve a divine purpose. Each challenge we face helps to refine our character, build our perseverance, and deepen our trust in God. The growth we experience during these difficult times equips us to handle future challenges with greater strength and wisdom. The process of growth through challenges often involves a transformation in how we see ourselves and the world around us. Difficult circumstances have a way of revealing our weaknesses, fears, and limitations. They expose the areas of our lives where we still need healing, growth, and development. But God uses these moments to teach us important lessons about humility, grace, and resilience. We learn to rely on Him more fully and to trust that He is working in us, even when the process feels slow or painful. Trusting God during these times means surrendering our desire for comfort and control and allowing God to use the challenges to refine us into the people He created us to be. In addition, embracing growth through challenges allows us to develop qualities such as patience, compassion, and empathy. As we navigate our own struggles, we become more sensitive to the needs of others who are facing their own battles. The empathy we gain from our own pain enables us to offer support and encouragement to those around us, creating a sense of community and connection. Through our struggles, God shapes us into vessels of His love and grace, allowing us to reflect His character to the world. Sometimes it can be difficult to see how God is using a particular challenge for our good in the moment. The pain or confusion we experience can obscure our understanding, and we may feel as though we are stuck in a never-ending cycle of hardship. However, trusting that God has a purpose behind every trial allows us to hold on to hope. We may not always understand the why of our suffering, but we can trust that God, in His infinite wisdom, is using it to shape us and fulfill His greater plan. Romans 8:28 reassures us that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Even in the darkest times, God is at work, transforming us and preparing us for what He has planned. In conclusion, trusting God's plan through challenges is an essential part of the Christian journey. Difficulties are not to be seen as setbacks or punishments, but as opportunities for spiritual growth and transformation. As we face life's trials, we are invited to trust that God is using these experiences to shape us into stronger, more resilient individuals. The challenges we encounter refine our faith, build our character, and deepen our relationship with God. While the process may be uncomfortable, it is through these struggles that we become more like Christ and are better equipped to fulfill God's purpose for our lives. Trusting God's plan means trusting that, even in the hardest moments, He is at work in us, preparing us for the future He has planned. Trusting God's plan also means embracing the idea of surrendering our own understanding and expectations in favor of God's will. As human beings, we are naturally inclined to want to control our lives, predict our future, and ensure that things unfold according to our own desires. This can be particularly true when we have dreams, goals, or a vision of how we believe our lives should look. However, trusting God's plan requires a willingness to let go of our tightly held expectations and accept that God's will for us may be different from what we envisioned. It is the act of surrendering our plans to a higher power, trusting that God knows what is best for us and that His plan is always for our ultimate good. At the heart of this surrender is the recognition that God sees the bigger picture in a way that we cannot. We often focus on the present moment and the immediate outcomes, but God's perspective is eternal. He knows the beginning from the end, and He understands how every decision, event, and circumstance fits into a much larger story. We may not always see the reasons behind the twists and turns of our lives, but trusting God's plan means accepting that His perspective and timing are perfect. This kind of surrender is not easy. It requires humility and faith, as we must release our need for control and trust that God's plan is better than anything we could imagine. Surrendering our understanding also involves letting go of the desire for certainty. In our world, we often seek clear answers, visible results, and assurance before moving forward. We want to know exactly what the future holds and be able to make plans with confidence. But trusting God's plan requires a different approach. It requires faith in the unseen and the unknown. We may not always receive a detailed roadmap of where we are headed, but we are assured that God is guiding us step by step. Proverbs 3:5-6 reminds us to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. This verse encourages us to release the need for certainty and lean fully on God's guidance. When we surrender our understanding, we also surrender the desire to control the outcomes. We may have specific ideas about how our lives should unfold, or we may have set goals and ambitions that we believe are in alignment with God's will. But the act of surrender means accepting that God's plan might look different from our own. Sometimes the path we envision for ourselves is not the one God has for us. There may be detours, delays, or challenges that seem contrary to our expectations. However, trusting God's plan means acknowledging that He knows the best path for us, even if it doesn't look like what we had in mind. This kind of trust requires letting go of our own agenda and accepting that God's will, although sometimes mysterious or difficult to understand, is always for our ultimate good. The process of surrendering is not a one-time event, but rather an ongoing practice of faith. Every day we are faced with choices, circumstances, and challenges that invite us to surrender our plans and trust in God's will. There will be moments when it's easy to trust and moments when it feels more difficult, but in each situation we are called to reaffirm our trust in God's sovereignty. This continual surrender brings peace because it frees us from the burden of trying to control every aspect of our lives. We can rest in the knowledge that God is in control, that He is working everything out for His purpose, and that His plans are always good, even when they are not immediately clear. Finally, surrendering our own understanding allows us to experience the depth of God's love and faithfulness. When we choose to trust Him with our lives, we open ourselves to His grace, wisdom, and guidance. We are able to look back and see how God has led us through each chapter of our lives, even when we didn't understand why things unfolded the way they did. Surrendering our expectations leads to a deeper trust in God's goodness and a more intimate relationship with Him. Trusting God's plan means surrendering our own understanding and expectations, recognizing that His ways are higher than ours. This surrender is not a passive resignation, but an active trust in God's perfect will. By releasing our need for control, we embrace the peace that comes from knowing that God is guiding us and that His plan for our lives is good. Though it can be difficult to let go of our own desires and uncertainties, the act of surrender allows us to walk in greater faith, trusting that God knows the way even when we do not. Through surrender, we find freedom, peace, and the confidence that God's plan will always lead us to where we need to be. Trusting God's plan is not always an easy journey, but it is essential for experiencing a fulfilling and purposeful life. One of the most important aspects of trusting God's plan is recognizing that it is designed to bring about the ultimate good for us. Even when we cannot fully comprehend the reasons behind certain events or circumstances, the key to trusting in God's plan is understanding that, despite our limited perspective, God's plan for our lives is far greater than anything we could ever imagine for ourselves. This trust enables us to navigate life's ups and downs with greater resilience, faith, and hope. God's plan is rooted in His infinite love for us. It is easy to become frustrated, confused, or disheartened when things don't go according to our own plans. In these moments, we may question God's intentions, wondering why He would allow us to go through difficult situations. However, trusting that God's plan is for our ultimate good requires us to believe that He is always working on our behalf, even in the midst of struggles. In Jeremiah 29:11, God reassures us of His good intentions for our lives. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." Even when we face hardships, this verse reminds us that God's plans are designed to give us a future full of hope, not to harm us. One of the reasons it can be difficult to trust God's plan is because we are often focused on immediate results and outcomes. We want things to happen quickly, and when they don't, it can feel like God is distant or unresponsive. But trusting God's plan involves believing that His timing is perfect, even if it doesn't align with our own. In the same way that a seed needs time to grow into a full tree, there are times in our lives when we need to be patient and allow God's plan to unfold. Sometimes growth requires waiting and enduring difficult seasons, but it is during these times that we learn to trust God more deeply and grow in our faith. Trusting God's plan also means embracing the idea that His plan may involve detours or unexpected changes. We often become so fixated on a particular outcome or direction that we struggle to accept when things don't go according to our expectations. However, God's plan is not limited to the paths we envision for ourselves. It may involve a shift in direction that leads to better opportunities, new experiences, or personal growth that we never would have encountered had things gone as planned. As Isaiah 55:8-9 reminds us, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." God's plan often takes us to places we never thought we would go, but those detours are part of His perfect design for our lives. It is also important to remember that trusting God's plan does not mean we will be exempt from difficulties or hardships. In fact, God's plan for us often involves trials and challenges that refine our character, strengthen our faith, and draw us closer to Him. The Apostle Paul writes in Romans 5:3-4, "We also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope." The challenges we face, though difficult, are often the very tools that God uses to shape us into the person He desires us to be. Trusting God's plan means trusting that He is using even the painful moments for our good and His glory. One of the greatest benefits of trusting God's plan is the peace and assurance it brings. When we relinquish control and trust that God is guiding us, we free ourselves from the burden of worry and anxiety. We can rest in the confidence that God's plan is far better than our own, and that He will always provide for us and lead us in the right direction. Philippians 4:6-7 reminds us that when we trust in God's plan, His peace will guard our hearts and minds. This peace transcends understanding, and it allows us to face uncertainty with calm assurance. In conclusion, trusting God's plan is a powerful and transformative choice that allows us to live in alignment with His will. It requires us to acknowledge that His plan is not only greater than our own, but it is also designed for our ultimate good. While the journey may not always be easy or clear, trusting God's plan enables us to experience peace, grow in faith, and navigate life's challenges with resilience. As we learn to trust God, we become more confident in His ability to guide us, knowing that His plans are always for our welfare, our future, and our hope. By surrendering to God's plan, we find true fulfillment and purpose in life, and we can rest assured that He is with us every step of the way.